Well, hello everyone. My name is Tim Mikilashvili, CEO of Amadea Pharma, an analytics and organizational change agency that focuses on business performance in life sciences. I also happen to have started the Medical Innovation Olympics, and I couldn't have done it without the help of our board that you will see here. Again, expert judges. And today we are promoting, again, in our third monthly session, an upcoming event that you don't want to miss, the fifth annual Medical Innovation Olympics. Okay, and here is just a little bit of the preview of the platform Whova and our event last year. Okay, and there was a lot of activity. This was the theme: Layer the Science, Leap with Defiance, because of quite a lot of challenges in the healthcare ecosystem that are somewhat headwinds, if you will. But there's many different reasons why you should compete. Proven track record, lots of networking, community threads as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll also share with you the link where you can join the Healthcare Champions community. And so those of you who have registered for this have already automatically been a part of it, and there'll be benefits of that. There's a lot of exclusive content, and also free registration before we actually open it up next month. But so we have two speakers today, Melissa Norcross and Tina Rezahani, and they'll introduce themselves. And the topics that we want to discuss are how leaders are implementing AI. What are some of the challenges? Why are they getting it wrong? Based on a new article in Harvard Business Review that Melissa will highlight for us. And then Tina Rezahani, of course, was a global medical affairs leader in pharma and biotech. She'll talk about her highlights from the Medical Affairs Professional Society meeting that just took place, that we both returned from, in fact, in Denver, sunny Denver. But I'd like to just open up for some introductions very quickly. Melissa, why don't you begin?
I am an executive who has worked at a number of companies that we've taken through that technology-driven transformation. The latest one is AI, but there's been others before that. And so I'm passionate about helping other leaders navigate the chaos and get to where they can capture a lot of the value. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you about how to do that and how to navigate these latest challenges.
Yeah, great. Tina, since you're our special guest, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for having me. So I have spent about a little over 15 years now in the industry, and I have to say this is one of the most exciting times that I'm seeing with regards to the progression that we've made within medical affairs from a strategic level, and the integration of new technology and AI to be able to show the impact that we're making is so absolutely critical to medical affairs in our industry. And so I'm just really excited today to be here to talk to you guys about some of the things that Tim and I heard and saw at the Medical Affairs Professional Society meeting, and then how we can take that and implement it into medical affairs to continue to progress what we're seeing, which is really exciting. So thank you for having me.
Sure. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to have you here for the first time. Graham, John, whoever would like to go next.
I start?
Go, yeah, sure.
Well, I'm coming up to 50 years working in tech soon, because I started when I was 17 and I'm now 66. And so I've initially worked in tech, but now more recently in biotech. And it's quite interesting, actually. One of the areas I'm looking at is the link between acetylation of nuclear proteins and splicing factors. And that actually looks to be a more complex process than protein folding. And obviously, protein folding is something that has been quite well predicted by AlphaFold. And I'm wondering, actually, I'm looking with Birmingham University at the moment, at using machine learning to develop the model to link electrostatic processes the bromodomain proteins, and the Henderson-Hasselbalch aspects of acetylation to splicing and nonsense-mediated decay and the like. I don't think it's possible to do it any other way because it's such a complex process. So we will see. The challenge is, what answers can AI provide for us that we haven't been able to get so far? And I'm somebody, I use actually 4 different systems. And it's interesting how that they come up with different answers, sometimes contradictory, which is why it's good to have 4 different systems, because you can make a judgment as to which one's right. So it's very interesting. It's a very rapidly changing environment that we're in at the moment with multiple challenges. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, John. Graham.
Hi, I'm Graham Long. I was originally trained as a clinical biochemist. I spent a number of years in academic cancer research and worked also in large mid-sized biopharma, and then numerous years in commercialization technology platforms, primarily serving drug discovery, but also the broader life sciences. Had the pleasure of working with great teams, multiple different areas, companies all around the world, small, medium, and large, and helping them interpret market needs and technology solutions.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, we're live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. I want to just remind everyone, we're looking forward to your comments as well. So as our speakers and panel engages in the discussion, please make sure to add to the conversation. But let's start with this article, which you, Melissa Norcross, brought to my attention. I came across it through LinkedIn, and I delved a little bit deeper into it. And I just so happened to have an AI presentation that I was responsible for at the Medical Affairs, at the Drug Information Association meeting in Boston. And I used a lot of these very powerful real-world quotes from executives that were actually used in this article. And so I'd love for you to just maybe take us through some of them. Where senior leaders are struggling with AI adoption, according to the latest research, right?
Yeah, I think the big thing, which we're all experiencing, is that there's a lot of individual noise and individual usage of AI, but it doesn't seem to be getting all the way to the bottom line, right? It's not showing up in our profit statements. It's not having the same systemic-wide impacts that we would expect it to have. Like, we're seeing individual gains, but somehow it's not making it from great individual gains to organizational gains. And when they surveyed a lot of the executives, almost all of them, 93%, said, look, the big barrier is not in technology, it's in people. And, as I was reflecting on it, I was thinking, that's the same thing we learned when it came to AI or technology systems and IT systems. We've all been in that moment where, somebody comes in and you say, I have this big problem in my organization or this big challenge I want to solve. And some IT person says, I've got the system that's going to fix it all. And we all know now as leaders that the system is an element of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. You got to deal with the people around it, the processes around it. And that's one of the elements of it. The other element that we see of that is that there's a constant ongoing shift. Right? It's not as if we got this new technology, we're all figuring out how to use it. It's that we got a technology on March the 5th, which is very different on March the 10th, and even more different on April the 5th. And it's this constant change and sea change. It's kind of like trying to surf. It's not that you're hitting one wave and that you master that wave and you just repeat it. It's that the waves are shifting. You're trying to surf amidst an ever-changing climate and environment and trying to navigate to your own reality to get there. And that is the other thing that's going on. And so it's sort of change stacked on top of change. So when you're trying to capture those organizational systematic ROIs around this stuff and those benefits, you're trying to design a system that constantly evolves and learns. And we're just not great at that as humans, right? Constantly learning systems is kind of like trying to rebuild the plane as you're flying it and then figuring out how to land in a totally different plane in 5 minutes, and 5 minutes after that, and 5 minutes after that. And so what the tips that we get from this, and what it appears some of the best practices are to design learning systems. And so this gets back to other research that we've done in the past that we're going to have to think about. You know, Chris Argyris originally developed this notion of systems that learn from one another and that build learning and become more and more capable over time. And that's what we're trying to navigate and build when it comes to AI-based and empowered systems. We're trying to get systems that continue to learn. And what you want to do is you want to get that buy-in across the organization, but you need to do that by creating this safe space where people can experiment, where people can shift, and you effectively lower the risk of experimentation. You lower the risk of failing, not because you're failing, but because you're building in ways to learn and share that. So we as leaders, the other thing we need to do is think about how our role shifts from teacher to facilitator of knowledge sharing and best practices. You know, we just heard about how you can plug in 4 different models and all of your factors and get 4 different answers, because all of these AI models are good at different things. And they're like having really smart people who are not that precise. And so they're good for generating ideas, but not always for getting to a quantitative decision. And we have to understand the weaknesses and strengths of each of those answers and models as we go and learn how to share those better. So a lot of the research is pointing us to some of these same principles that we've had to lean into anytime we're uncertain about something and it's evolving. I mean, if I think about it, climate change is the same way. Very, very slow changes, then all of a sudden a leap, and we're all having to try and figure out how to navigate that uncertainty that moves and switches up right under our feet. It gives us unstable ground to stand on, and we have to get used to navigating that instability and helping all of our people navigate that same instability.
Yeah. So some of the verbatim quotes really hit home pretty well, you know, as I was reading this article.
Oh, yeah. I
Melissa,
had that same emotion where it was like, it's like they're reading my mind. I've thought this before. I've felt this before. I've been frustrated by this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those were the ones that I actually highlighted when in my presentation in early March in Boston. You know, quotes from executives like, okay, so if there's AI in it, right, then we have to add it. But does it always make sense, right? We don't know, right? Other kinds of questions from executives about AI. Okay, so as long as it's AI, they understand that they may need to innovate. But once the conversation gets a little bit more deeper about how to evaluate AI, what metrics to use, then executives lose interest, is how the article phrased it.
Yeah.
Can you maybe expand on that? Is that familiar to you? I mean,
Oh, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know if anybody else has been through, we see lots of other, it almost feels like a bubble, right? Like
Yeah.
the housing market that everybody was into buying up property, the dot-com bubble, the technology boom in the early 80s, where all you have to do is stick a label on it that says either .com or
Right.
.ai, and all of a sudden everybody's interested in it, but they have no idea why they're even interested in it. And so the winners in this are going to be the people who focus on the applications and the uses that actually add value, that they're measuring it against the outcomes they're trying to achieve, not the people who are in it because it's the cool, sexy new thing and they're adding it to everything. And finding out that it's not actually helping them get where they need to go. And it is, the boring stuff is, it's boring.
Right.
No, I'm thinking about it because it's tax time in the US, right? And I just had a
Right.
call with my accountant, and I don't know anybody who ever has that moment where they're like, I'm super excited because the coolest thing I've done this week is to talk to my accountant about how I'm going to file my taxes and what other deductions I'm going to take. Nobody has that discussion. It's not sexy. It's not cool. And yet, it probably has a more material impact on my personal finances than a lot of other conversations and moments that I invest in other things. But it's not the sexy stuff. And I think that's what, in this day and age, I tend to think about the sexy, the interesting, the compelling. CEOs are talking about AI, but just like anything else, where the rubber hits the road is where the real value comes from. And if you're not connecting the dots between your really cool strategy and the implementation of that, you're never going to realize the value of that. It's just an architected building on the page. It's never a home you live in.
Mhm. Yeah, Melissa, you brought up something earlier about uncertainty also, and right, and of course, everyone talks about AI replacing humans, but actually only replacing those who don't know how to work with AI. Of course, right? We hear that everywhere now
Yeah.
among speakers. But the article talks about the fear of how executives often the way they pilot AI is usually with a lot of reservation and with just a lot of fear, and almost like it's just one pilot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's it. But and there's the people who have to use it may be a little bit very conscious about their own roles also, right? Having to be replaced. So is that a success factor in or is there a long-term approach you need to have? What is the article, or what is your opinion? Yeah.
I always think about allegories when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think about this like surfing. These leaders are like, I've seen surfing on the Olympics. I totally want to do that. So
Right.
they truck on down to the beach. They find a surfer dude and go, hey, I think I want to try this out. The guy goes, great. And I have these other friends who want to try this out too. And that's their team. They all get on the surfboard, paddle out, take one attempt at it, fall, and then they're like, well, it didn't work. That's done. That's not how you learn to surf, particularly not at an elite level. You fall, you repeat, you try again, you get more coaching, you figure out what works for you, you get feedback, you trade ideas with other people about, well, how did you stay on when this kind of wave hit you or that kind of wave hit you? the notion that we try it once in a specific setting is great if you have a formula, but in an evolving world where the technology and the capabilities of it are evolving real time, there is no way to have a specific formula defined up front that allows you to step on the surfboard, hit the first wave, and be a good surfer. There's just not. So the winners are the people who are okay to fall, who make sure that they're not learning to surf on rocks, that they're in a kind of beach where it's safe to fall, where they get other people around them who can also coach them, who can say, hey, I learned this and it works, or, try this. Those are the people who are winning and whose organizations are extracting real value from it. Ultimately, this is a financial decision. If you're investing in AI, you're choosing not to invest in something else. But if you're investing in it as if you're going to run one pilot and then decide either to roll it out to the whole business or to throw it out completely, you're making bad investment decisions because you're choosing not to invest in other things, and then you're not making the most out of the investment you are actually making. And I think that's the big mistake that a lot of leaders that aren't successful in this are making. And that's what we're learning from the people who are getting it right. And what we're hearing is, oh, I used AI to do this. But what we should be listening to is, I experimented with this 50 different times with 15 different people, failed 49 times, and this is how I got to that 50th time. This is how I learned to do it, because we don't need to replicate exactly what that other company or organization or individual did on that 50th time, although it might have some value. The real value is learning what they did to get from trial one to the successful trial in the end.
Yeah. Okay, great. I want to open it up to the panel, to the others, to also maybe comment on the article or ask Melissa questions.
Well, I think that the whole area is moving, as Melissa says, it's all moving very quickly. And obviously, agentic AI has been a factor that has only relatively recently come to the floor with OpenClaw and its variations around that. And this is moving very, very quickly. And you're already seeing situations where AI does things that are unpredictable and uncontrolled and cause quite a bit of harm to the people who use it. So there's a lot of learning there about how you control it, because it doesn't behave like a human being does. I wouldn't say it's smart. I would say it's very knowledgeable, which is slightly different, because it makes really stupid decisions at times. And it doesn't spot when there's
intelligence without wisdom.
Yes, that's fair enough. But it has a lot of knowledge, although you've got to be very careful about how you ask a question, because if you ask a question one way, key parts of the knowledge will be hidden. So you have to ask it another way. Now, we are in a process of rapid change, and there are political issues here, obviously, because it is having an effect in the employment market, and we don't want a society with lots of people excluded from it. I presume nobody here does anyway. So that there are some challenges with that, but I think that what Melissa was saying about who may benefit, I think it's the people who implement it effectively who will get the best benefit from it. That's where disruptors can come in. But there is a fact that when you go to some of the open source AI models and you shove that behind whatever system you've got, rather than one of the copyrighted systems, then the difference may not be that great. I'm actually using the GitHub code assistant, which then uses so many different AIs behind it. It's quite amazing, the sort of range that there are there, as well as Claude, which is the Anthropic one, Gemini, which is Google's, and OpenAI's ChatGPT. And it is interesting to see the different answers, particularly on very difficult questions. So we shall see where it goes. But I think Melissa is right. It's going to be the people who are at the end making good use of it that that have the ROI benefit. And it's really quite hard to work out. In some areas, it's easier to work out. But there are people who've implemented it for customer support and then reversed back out of it because it did it so badly. So, you know, it's just going gung-ho for AI is not very good for your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you do it without that learning cycle in there in a less controlled way. You know, you surf one wave and you're like, got it. I'm a master. And then you go out and you have your wipeout because you didn't learn to surf in another condition. The way I also think about this is, my mental model is these AI tools are like interns that have come out of university. They are super smart, highly capable, and don't always have the context. And so it's up to the leaders that partner with them to understand how best to use them, how best to focus them, which of the interns works well in this context or that context. And so in some ways, I always turn it back on us as leaders because it becomes a leadership challenge for how we architect things around it. Not, do we use AI or not, but how that makes the difference.
Yeah. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit to the healthcare, how AI is affecting healthcare and medical affairs, the function in particular. Let's not assume that everyone knows about medical affairs here in the audience. This is a function that is the bridge between sales and R&D that helps translate a lot of very complex medical information and engage a lot of our leading scientists into our activities, clinical and development activities, across all cycles of the products. And so, as I mentioned, Tina and I attended the Medical Affairs Professional Society meeting in Denver, and Dr. Susanna Galani kicked it off with a keynote that was quite memorable, I think, where she talked about the fact that we have so much innovation, in AI and technology, yet we have so many people that are unhappy in healthcare, clinicians, right? There's a lot of burnout, right? They feel unseen, right? And so she spent a lot of time talking about the way patient outcomes are being measured. She has a background as an accountant as well, right? And there was a discussion about the fact that there are three real takeaways that I noted for myself, and I'll ask Tina also to comment because she attended a lot more of them than of this conference than I did. But that keynote really struck me. Really caught my attention. And so the three points that she made is, why don't we invest more in how we measure patient outcomes differently? Okay. The second one was about the fact that that AI, the promise of AI is to rehumanize healthcare again, which is quite aspirational and optimistic, I think, and I share that, with Dr. Susanna, but it's, I'm certainly believe that it's able to do that, and we can have that discussion as well. And the third point was that numbers are just numbers alone, right? That numbers need to be converted into behaviors. The value of numbers and analytics comes in how we translate them into behavior. So that's just how I wanted to frame up this discussion with MAPS. So what were some of the recurring themes, Tina, that you saw?
Tim, can I just add one thing to that keynote before we move on to that? So I think one of the other really important key points from that keynote presentation was that, AI is really giving us an opportunity with the burnout that healthcare is facing to have more patient encounters and lift a lot of the administrative burdens that are happening within these, clinic and practices where they're unable to really engage with patients and do their job because of all the burden of entering information into the EMRs and everything else. So there is a lot of opportunity there to bring back the humanity into healthcare with the implementation of AI, which I thought was also a really great takeaway from this presentation.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. With regards to the other sessions at MAP, so AI was absolutely one of the most consistent and energizing themes in most of the sessions, and the hallway conversations, all most of the meetings. So, what really stood out to me, and Melissa mentioned this, is that we've moved beyond the phase of should we be using AI to more important questions like how do we actually use AI in a way that's driving strategic impact, both within medical affairs and externally with patients and our HCPs. So one of the real clear shift is that we've moved beyond just experimenting and with AI to actually how do we operationalize this, right? So it's no longer sitting in a pocket of innovation only, and teams are really trying to embed this into medical affairs work streams. One of the more common themes that I saw within the sessions was especially around insight generation, content development within medical affairs and scientific communication, literature monitoring to stay up to date on the latest data, as well as HCP engagement, right? So how do we better prepare for, the conversations we're walking into with our HCPs? And the second strong alignment I saw within AI is not that it's just replacing medical affairs, right? That fear that we continue to talk about, is it replacing our jobs? Is it not? But really that it's amplifying what we're already doing, right? So within medical affairs specifically, the role of the field medical, MSL, medical director, this is more about how do we become more strategic, not less. So, AI is really taking away, like I mentioned as part of the keynote, also within medical affairs, a lot more of that administrative and the analytical burden that we, are facing within medical affairs, and allows us to really free up that time to have high value scientific exchange and be more strategic, not just externally, but also internally with our stakeholders. So, and then lastly, just really how AI adoption right now, organizations are using AI to analyze and identify patterns across, field insights much, much faster than the way we used to traditionally do it. So that ability has really increased, fragmented data collection to real-time intelligence, which has really shifted how we're able to be more strategic within medical affairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that gap, I guess, from insights to action is being closed thanks to the AI, right? It seems like, Tina. So where is it falling short, and why? Some of this adoption in medical affairs in particular.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Tim. So similar to what Melissa also mentioned, it's really not just the barriers around AI as far as technology, but it's how do we make this more, systemically and organizationally accepted, right? We're doing a lot of the individual AI, but how do we scale that? And there's really a lack of governance, I would say, in many organizations. So teams are adopting AI, but they're not fully defining like the compliance frameworks and the validation process and the ownership models. I mean, we've come a long way. There's a lot of companies that are, and they're implementing fast, and they're really going through that ambiguity in real time and building the frameworks and models. But that's still a huge area, and there's not a lot of clear governance there. So that's one of the small issues, but it truly is foundational. And then I would say, secondarily, data quality is still a major challenge, right? So we have really strong data that it's built on, but it's still fragmented, and the information is inconsistent, and there's a lot of siloed data sources that are being, input into the AI. So there's a lot of question around ROI and that leaders are still trying to answer. How do we clearly connect AI to the meaningful outcomes from an enterprise level? And that's really, those are some of the areas that we are still evolving and trying to figure out with AI.
Okay. So why don't we skip to that, maybe the question, skip ahead a little bit and talk about the ROI, then the business the business cases, right? I think some of the sessions that I know you had attended and you had talked to me about as we were, having our hallway conversations, was that medical affairs had now some new tools or new leaders who explained them how to build their business case for AI in a better way.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, that was really instrumental with all the dialogue and conversation around AI. How do we build the business case, right? And so, again, Melissa also referred to this a little bit when she mentioned cost, but I think we need to shift. The biggest shift here is moving from a cost justification to true value demonstration. And most teams are, in these business cases that they're presenting is we need AI. And here's the specific problem that we're solving, and AI is helping us solve it more effectively, right? So what's the value demonstration? And they're defining the success measures up front. For example, reducing, from a field perspective, reducing insight cycle time from the time we generate the insights or gather the insights to the conversations happening internally within lifecycle management, and closing that loop in a much faster, quicker way to show impact, and then increasing the quality of those insights. What is what we consider actionable, improving the turnaround time and enhancing efficiency, right? That's where the real value is. So again, that really translates into the reduced administrative burden that then translate into more meaningful scientific exchange, which ultimately leads to bringing along your HCPs, advancing the clinical practice sites so that patients ultimately will benefit from the value of implementing the AI into practice. And I think another big one that came up, Tim, in this business case was really being able to tell the story. It's not just about building a business case around the data. It's about being able to really articulate the impact of it in a way that resonates with your, key decision makers and the stakeholders across the entire organization.
Yeah. So were there maybe any specific innovative case studies that really caught your attention?
Specific innovative case studies. There was once, trying to think specifically, really, I would say the shift from vanity metrics and measuring the number of engagements to, again, advancing the HCP sentiment in a way that's improving patient outcomes, right? Because ultimately, the goal is to improve patient outcomes. And I think where AI is going to take us, and some of the case studies that I did see was more focused around patient-centered metrics, and things like patient-reported outcomes, time to diagnosis, access to therapy. This was kind of a lot more futuristic thinking, but some of the case studies that we did, this is where we saw the vision really going to be able to directly measure the impact that we're having with the medical affairs activities in a much broader scale.
Okay, there was one also that you and I talked about that you told me about commercial and medical, kind of a combined metrics that all were converged, that included both commercial and medical metrics. Was there some discussion about how to really operationalize that internally?
There wasn't any specific. It was more of a debate around.
Oh, okay.
It was more of a debate that that they had it maps around commercial and medical and how they can work compliantly, continue to work compliantly, but integrating AI. And it was mostly really focused on like, internal medical business reviews, helping really aggregate the data and support the conversations being had between medical and commercial at a leadership level to make it more strategic. And, how do you do that compliantly utilizing AI? But there wasn't necessarily a framework. It was just whether or not, AI can be utilized to have more strategic conversations cross-functionally within medical and commercial.
Yeah. Well, let's, maybe tie some of the comments that both of you talked about to how clinical outcomes are being defined in the healthcare system as well as in the industry, right? And going back to Susanna Galani's description here, where she listed the outcome measurement gap, right? And where the current metrics are quite limited still, right? They define, let's say, outcomes based on mortality, whether or not a patient died, right? But can you measure more different metrics along that way? Quality of life, years, okay, it may be a good measure, but how do people really perceive it? Do they know how to translate that measure? Right? Patient-reported outcomes, claims data. There's a lot of gap from when the claims data are actually become available to the actual impact on the patients. Also, that I believe that was mentioned by some of the expert panelists. And the problem, she talked about the problem of these metrics of outcomes being retrospective, right, lagging, being episodic, because the patient's health is constantly evolving. It's a social domain, it's a personal domain, and as Tina, I think both you and Melissa mentioned, right, it's a moving target, if you will. It's not an episode. It's not episodic, and it's disconnected, I think, which you mentioned several times. I want to maybe discuss with you, Tina, one expert panel that I think we both attended, which focused on how medical impact is being measured. And that's, of course, an area of interest for my company, Amedea, where you're also an advisor. And there was a poll. There was a live poll in the standing room only audience with some presenters from ZS, AbbVie, and BMS, tremendous leaders. They had shared quite a few great case studies demonstrating that when you have an MSL present, medical science liaison for medical affairs, who meets with physicians more often, there is significantly statistically significant reduction in the care gap, in the patient care gap that they confirmed, which of course is well known, but we need to generate that kind of evidence, right, more to build those business cases. But in this one particular question of what was the main barrier to measure medical impact, the top one was hard to access or combine the data in one place, right, across many different functions within medical, which is very diverse. You have content generation, scientific communications, publications, medical information, and various different functions and teams. So that was one important, I think, fact. But also, it seems like the industry is moving away from activities to outcomes, and that was kind of a big takeaway here from that panel. And there was some of a debate that ensued there, where we talked about some of the gaps that still remain, because if you're only measuring outcomes or activities alone, right, how do you then reproduce those outcomes in a measurable way, in a predictable manner? How do you avoid repeat failures, right? So is it really just measuring the outcomes now, which I'm glad that the industry is doing, or should we be measuring the dynamic relationship between the activities and outcomes, right, in this rapidly evolving patient condition and outcomes, right? That's one question. And the other question really is, that the medical role is not purely technical. It's a behavioral role. How well a medical affairs team member collaborates with sales, with R&D, right, is so critical to product and company success. So we need to also measure some of the internally facing workflows and behaviors, which we're really not doing. And I thought I still see that as a gap, because when we do talk about medical affairs impact metrics, we tend to single out externally facing ones. So that's just two of those I think gaps. And then of course the third one, I believe, and I'll just end on this one before I ask for your comments, maybe the others as well, and Tina, is that the attribution issue. There's a debate about whether or not we should attribute patient outcomes to medical affairs. Okay. At this panel, for example, our panelists, they had the position that, look, it doesn't really matter. We're an enterprise. We're a large company. It doesn't matter if it's market access or sales or someone else who contributes and drives these patient outcomes, right? But then, at the same time, right, how do you make sure that your medical teams continue to be motivated, continue to know that their daily work counts? Or how do you make sure that you really justify the headcount that you need, the resources that you really need to drive those patient outcomes? And that's still, I think, a remaining gap that I think we need to solve for as well. And we started that debate at that expert panel. So what is your position on this, or how do we go about maybe going a little bit deeper? Tina, I'll start with you. And
I mean, one thing I will add, Tim, I think that what you're referring to, I think a big key to this is breaking down just the silos within medical affairs.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen such an evolution in a positive direction of field medical working with their evidence generation or SciComm and all those teams. So like you said, how do we internally measure the performance of all these teams working together in unity? And how do we come, as one strategic partner with all these different various cross-functional partners, and then partner that with commercial and ClinOps and R and other functions in R&D. So, I think that's one critical value add to the platform, with how we've evolved in medical affairs and how it can continue to bring the team together to show the impact of what we're doing and align that to the overall business. And so I just wanted to add that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. John, yeah.
There was an interesting paper which was published, I think, in March, but may have been in February, which looked at a new concept, that of peak span. Now, health span, we're all aware of health span, and health span perhaps correlates to some extent to quality of life years. But there's an interesting thought on peak span, which is to what extent you can manage to maintain peak function, from which things deteriorate, but people are still deemed healthy. The question of whether you have comorbidities and the like is obviously an issue. And it's interesting, looking two aspects. One is the external aspect, which is really what we're trying to achieve, which is better outcomes for people, patients, but people. To what extent actually do we manage to prevent chronic diseases rather than respond to chronic diseases, which is obviously a broader question as well. To what extent AI can assist with that? Obviously, the internal aspects, because businesses have to make a profit. So if they're not managed to make a profit, they go out of business. But I think there is this interesting question as whether we can move a little bit away. Well, we're not really doing very well on health span, to be honest. I think one of the reasons you get burnout is people get lots of chronic diseases and they're trying to manage the balance out. I was talking to somebody today who has chronic kidney disease and is massively anemic, but the nephrologists don't care. So this person is suffering from all sorts of shortage of iron problems in all sorts of ways, but is driven by their chronic kidney disease because they're not looking at the broader picture, which is the problems that happen when you haven't got enough iron, which are very important. And I think with AI potentially we can move more towards health span and then perhaps towards peak span, which I think everyone would agree that's what we really want to achieve. And, what's called compressed morbidity, which is you live very healthy life until one day you fall off a cliff, which is not a bad way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, longevity. Speaking of longevity and health span, this is certainly a topic that we always feature at the Medical Innovation Olympics. So you're going to have more speakers this year in October, but I think it's a great case study to demonstrate the need for continuous metrics and just continuously measuring many outcomes, right? That you can affect earlier, make better decisions. Thanks, John. Graham, anything to add, or Tina on?
Yeah, actually, I've been having some conversations with some industry leaders in biopharma, not just in medical affairs, upstream in the therapeutic groups and the biology groups and the preclinical development groups and translational medicine. And as you might expect, there's been an awful lot of evaluations of AI, ML solutions. And the recurring theme seems to be too many options, not enough time to look at these solutions thoroughly enough. And how the heck do you integrate all of this enormous amounts of data meaningfully into actionable insights that give meaningful outcomes? So very, very similar to medical affairs. And I think one of the biggest challenges here as well that organizations have been encountering, small, medium, and large drug development companies, there are multiple stakeholders cross-functionally that are involved at any given time. And if one function comes up with a solution that is perfect for them, they have to get everyone else to agree who are a stakeholder who need to see that data and integrate it into their processes, their systems, and it's too much. So I think there's huge challenges currently because there's so many options. And as Melissa said, the software's evolving at a breakneck pace. Do we adopt this one or the one next month? Because by 3 months, it's completely out of date and it gives us way better insights. So I think there's this confusion and anxiety about which one they go with and how they implement it cross-functionally against this incredibly complex, fast-moving machinery of drug development.
Yep. Oh, go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, I was going to say, Graham, I completely agree with the sentiments and what you've been hearing. I think a lot of times within medical affairs, if you're not bringing all the work streams together as well, like everyone's using different solution providers where you could really maximize, one solution provider, and that would reduce budget significantly when you talk about building a business case. And I think a lot of that has to do with all coming together within medical affairs at the leadership level and having those conversations. What are some of our areas of opportunity? What are the challenges we're having? How are we measuring impact? So that you can collectively, again, decide which vendor solution provider you want to work with to implement a lot of, these technologies. So I think that that's one really important thing that can happen in our industry to help us with that.
It strikes me just for all companies, all organizations in all markets, and leaders are struggling implementing AI, ML tools. And probably because many leaders aren't really familiar with how to use these tools and what these tools can do. It almost feels like there should be an annual or biannual retreat of the executive teams from the different functions to ask themselves, what are our major challenges? What tools are available in terms of tech stack that can help this? And let's define on an ongoing basis, so you're constantly reiterating it, what is our strategy for AI and with all of the stakeholders, rather than just one or two groups taking the lead on this? I think an organization has to these days. They struggle because there's too much choice and it's very complex, but the companies that don't implement these types of solutions will be lagging.
Yeah. I mean, in my presentation, for example, in March, I actually spent time purposely on highlighting one Korean study that demonstrated the gaps in evaluating metrics of various different AI models and being able to demonstrate superiority of one versus another. because unfortunately we use specificity, sensitivity, area under the curve, but they are based on averages, and treatment decisions are binary. And they don't account for difference in magnitude or direction and prevalence. And so I think that you need the training. Like I think that, like you said, Graham and Tina, and I think Melissa also mentioned this, which we don't have, I think among the leaders. So that actually brings me up to two cases that I just also want to quickly share and maybe ask for your final comments, because there was one expert panel, and I mentioned this to you, Tina, as well, that really captured my attention also, and I just wanted to share it with the audience here. And it was a case-based debate, if you will. And the first one talked about AI missing an early signal of cardiovascular toxicity. Okay, that was later identified by a healthcare physician. Okay, and then the second one, very quickly, I'll share with you, is one in rare disease. Okay, with rare disease, you don't have as much data that AI has, of course, right? So you have a lot of skewed data. The training sets are important. And so AI tends to underperform in those scenarios. So it's really the insurance policy, if you will, is kind of traceability, right? And that's consistent throughout Annex 22, the European guidelines and governance in Europe, which is a little bit higher and more developed, more strict, I would say, than in the United States. But those two cases, if you would to comment on what we can do, how do we address some of those gaps, maybe, in a healthcare setting.
Can I say perhaps one of the biggest challenges is who do you sue? Because
Oh yes, that was also discussed, by the way, at MAPS.
Yeah, well, that's obviously an AI company is not going to take the litigation risk.
Yeah.
Where does the insurance come in? Because it's so difficult to quantify. And it's all well and good for people, biohackers like myself. You trundle off and rummage around all the various machine language things. Take it at your own risk. But if you want to actually have somebody who has a duty of care, who can be sued for tort, I don't know what it is in America. I think it's still tort, which is a French word, but who can be sued for negligence if it all goes wrong. But that protection going to be very, I wouldn't want to be an insurance company quantifying the risk.
Yeah,
and that's the question is when there may come a point. Obviously, we've not addressed the issue of AGI, but then that's because we haven't got AGI yet. So
not yet.
We don't know what AGI is going to do. And then you have this agentic concept, which is that you set agentic AI the task of implementing AI in a corporate entity. Well, who's going to take the risk of that as well? Because there are risks with AI. There are risks of we don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah. So
it's
that was
I think the insurance thing is, until you resolve the insurance question, you're going to get lots of people who use AI to look up their own symptoms, take it at their own risk, and maybe talk to their doctors, and maybe don't talk to their doctors, or maybe they eat sodium bromide instead of sodium chloride, which is what one person did.
Yep. Well, that was addressed at this panel, John. I'm glad you mentioned it. And apparently, currently, according to the legal system, at least in the United States, it's really the human who's using AI who would be liable. But who knows where they're in the future?
If that's the case, they can sue
itself,
themselves. Only the lawyers would make money out of that.
Right. So that was kind of talked about.
I think.
Any final comments before we wrap up here? Yeah, just maybe one comment each. Yeah, please.
One thing, sorry, Tim. One of the organizational ways of de-risking, I think some of that is like taking ownership, and that's why they limit usage of AI outside AI sources beyond Copilot. I mean, I was in one of the roundtables and 9 out of 10 leaders were using Copilot, and that was the only closed system they were able to use. So I think that's one way the company tries to de-risk. And to your point, who we're going to sue? We can't sue anybody. It's our neck. It's whatever we put into this closed system that we're liable for with the AI agent. So, anyways, I just wanted to add that one point from some of the insights I learned.
Yeah,
something we could
great.
talk about.
Yeah, well, let's go back to again the start of this third session. This is Road to the Medical Innovation Olympics 2026. It's going to take place October 1st to the 16th. We invite you to join. There's a strong team of expert judges, new ones we're adding. You see, Tina, of course, as well, right? Tina, I think you'll be participating. Could you confirm that? Yes.
That's confirmed.
Okay, great.
And validated. No.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, and we hope to see you there. There are incredible startups and leaders that have won prizes, that actually announced receiving investments of $500,000 to $650,000 last year, for example, even as the Medical Innovation Olympics was taking place. In AI for drug discovery, we had David Mead from SynBio with immunosuppression cyclosporin, increasing the manufacturing capacity of cyclosporin, who were the two winners in the concept and product category. You do not have to be a startup in order to participate. Your product, your idea may be in a concept stage. It may not have to be deployed. You could be in medical affairs, right? You could have a drug, device, diagnostic, right? Med tech as well, right? And so you're going to learn more details next month. We're going to open the registration, but thanks to those who registered. And any other maybe calls to action to those who listened here or watched from anyone here? Tina, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, my call to action would be that there's a lot of great AI solution providers out there, and I encourage everyone to try to learn more about what is out there and bring those insights back into your teams, like within your organization internally, and just break down the silos and talk to each other cross-functionally, because we can only do more as a one team and under one mission for patients. So that would be my call to action for.
Thank you, Tina. Graham, John.
Well, my call to action is, am I on? Yeah, I'm on. My call to action is that it's really worth, if you've got any ideas, signing up to the Medical Innovation Olympics, because it's a way of developing your ideas. Whether or not you're using AI, I think it's a good idea to use AI because you can get better access to information. It's the same as using the internet, really. When the internet came in, it became a good idea to use the internet, and this is a step on. But that doesn't mean that all the ideas are going to come from AI, but it does make your life a lot easier in terms of finding information. It's made my life a lot easier.
Oh yeah, I concur. Graham?
I'm going to actually support both what John said there and Tina. So educate yourself on the technologies, the AIs, the platforms that are out there. There's thousands of them now. Many won't be applicable to what you do. So take some time to sift through those models that would be very well worth learning about. Because I think a lot of the hesitation and the failures in AI adoption is because of varying degrees of understanding and a lot of apprehension and fear. So demystify it, and then it won't be so scary, and then you'll be able to identify those use cases and those specific algorithms and tools that are going to bring value to you. And on the other comment that I have, the Medical Innovation Olympics brings together such a disparate group of individuals, entrepreneurs from all walks of life sciences, all different perspectives that are so complementary. You will learn so much. You will make connections. You'll make connections with colleagues who can perhaps give you insight into your own troubles and your own challenges within your own particular organization or venture. So a truly great forum for discussion, innovation, and just meeting like-minded individuals. So welcome.
I'm only grateful for everyone's time at the Olympics here as well. I really enjoyed this discussion today. I hope you also found a lot of new things to think about, those who are watching. All right. And with that, I'll see you soon. See you soon next month. Okay.
Bye all.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.